Hey, and welcome to our class. So, want to go through a real quick video here to give you some pointers on how to get ready for that test, some study tips, and some guides to getting yourself through that process so you can pass the test on the first try. Now, let me tell you that it's going to be worth the effort. I really appreciate you putting forth the effort to do it so far, but you're going to have to do a lot more work to get yourself ready to pass this test. Now, look, at the end of the day, the test is not about how smart you are. It's about how prepared you are. I promise you. I know people in this business that are barely smart enough to scratch their name in the mud with a stick, but they got a dadgum license and they're making some money. But I'm telling you, that process, like I said, getting you through it, it's not about, once again, it's not about how smart you are. It's about being prepared. You've got to do the preparation. Honestly, I've talked to people at some of the test companies, and they tell me that the tests are scientifically created by people a lot smarter than you and me that created these tests to scientifically determine who's done the work and who hasn't done the work. They want to make sure you're willing to put forth a lot of effort because they are what? They're just trying to keep the criminals out. This whole process, that's all it is. And they figure the average criminal won't put in that much effort. So you got to show them you're serious about this. You got to show them that you're willing to do the work to be prepared. Now, like I said, the payoff is if you are prepared, then you'll pass the test. For instance, let's suppose we have two students who are going to go take the test. One student does 100 practice questions. The other student does 1,000 practice questions. Which one of those is probably going to pass the test? Well, you're going, well, Brian, I'm going to be the person that does the 1,000 practice questions. Well, here's the problem with that. If you do 1,000 practice questions and it takes you a minute a question, which is about right, that's going to take you 12 hours to do 1,000 practice questions. And it's deadly, dull, boring. So that means you got to what? You got to have focus and drive and discipline to get yourself through that. And that's what the test is all about, to see if you've got that willingness to put forth that effort. But the other side of the coin is, if you'll do that, I promise you, you will pass the test. You will pass the test. So let me give you some tips. Now, first off, when we look at the process, you're going to be studying and getting yourself ready. You'll be taking the test in a quiet environment, so I also recommend you study in a quiet environment. And here's the process I recommend that you go through. Number one, every day. Now, listen, my experience has been that this stuff doesn't stick with you. It's way better to do a little bit of studying every day than to put your books down, don't touch anything, and come back a week later. It's better to do it in small chunks every day than a great big chunk a week from now, because otherwise it won't stick with you. So what you want to do is review each chapter in your online course, go through the quizzes for that. The quiz will be fresh, so you go through them again through each section as you go through and review those sections. And then you have what's called your exam tutor, which will help you get ready for the final exam. It's a bank of practice questions to help you get ready for your state exam. You want to go through, repeat the things out loud. You'll have your notes in the PDF printouts that you had. And then what you want to do is you take those online exams that what they call test tutor. For those of you, it's listed here as the comprehensive test. Those of you who are in the states that require a certificate, make sure you do that, pass your final exam for the course, and earn your certificate. Now, what you're going to do is you want to break your task into part. You want to have a plan. You want to have a plan for getting that test done. So what you want to do is figure out how many days you have until your test date. Teleperformance will help you set that test date, but you want to figure out how many days you have before your test date and figure out how much you have left to do. So let's say that you've got 6 days and you've got 10 chapters that you want to review. Then you're going to what? You're going to do 2 chapters per day. And what I always recommend is that you leave that last day before the test to do nothing but practice exams. I wouldn't do anything else but practice exams that day before the test. Now, I don't recommend doing a lot of practice questions the day of the test. Why? Because it'd be like an athlete running a race to warm up for a race the day that they're running a race. That wouldn't make much sense. So you're going to do light review, go through the materials, skim through it, make sure you hit, like, for example, the exam content outline for your state. But I wouldn't do a lot of practice questions. But the day before you test, nothing but practice questions. And so what I would recommend then, like I said, break into parts, leaving that last day, the day before you test, doing nothing but practice tests. So if you've got 6 days, that's 5 days to study and 1 day for practice quests. You break the 10 chapters into those 5 days, 2 chapters a day, and nothing but practice questions the day before you test. Now, like I said, you want to learn in a quiet environment. You also want to learn in a style that suits your learning method. Now, we all have our own learning preference. Some of us are visual learners. If the way you remember the answer to the question is you remember the PowerPoint or the thing that you saw on the screen, if you remember something that you wrote down, then you're probably a visual learner. Then we have audio learners. Now, audio learners, repeating it out loud, listening to it. If you remember some of our instructors' stories that they tell about some of the points, if that's how you remember it, then you're probably an audio learner. And then there's kinesthetic or experiential learners. Those are the kind of people, they need to do something or write something down. That's the kind of learner I am. If I'm in a class like this, I write lots and lots of notes. And I never look at the notes again, but it's just that thing of writing them down. That's how I learn. Now, you each have your own style that's best for you, and you want to focus on the style that works best for you. Now, if you're a visual learner, then what we recommend is create an outline in your book or review flashcards. Now, we do have flashcards for sale. Now, I do want to mention that we do have these flashcards, but the flashcards are designed for Florida, and I have not had time at this point, to update them for the other states. Now, could they be helpful for the other states? Sure, but there are Florida-specific things in there. The bulk of it is applicable to all states, but there are Florida stuff. So I'm not going to say, hey, go get the flashcards unless you really want to. Probably better to create your own. If you're in Florida, absolutely, they're fantastic. And then for audio learners, read out loud or listen to the audio review. Of course, we do have also an audio review that's available, and all these are available on our website. You go to mortonschools.com, click on Learning Tools, and we have these things that are available for us there. The audio review is also Florida specific, but once again, the bulk of it is designed for the main points that you're going to get, and I think that you folks will be finding it helpful. I also remind you, you do have the recordings, and you could figure out a way to play those back on Zoom, audio only, and that might help you as well. And that might be a better choice for many of you. All right? And then, finally, if you're an experiential learner, creating flashcards, right? So you get the kinesthetic people together with the visual learners and have them, one create the flashcards and the other look at the flashcards. Or teach somebody. That's a great way to learn, is teaching somebody, and it really help you master that material. All right? Now, to make learning easier, like I said, you want to study in an environment. The thing I'm going to tell you is the thing you tell your own kids. Go in your room, turn off the stereo, turn off the music, turn off the TV, focus, concentrate. And so for some of you, that quiet place to study is not home. So you need to probably find maybe an alternate place. Now, I know right now in the middle of a zombie apocalypse that the libraries, most cases, are not open and things like that. You don't have a lot of the resources that we normally do. But I promise you, if you think creatively, you can come up with some place that would be a great place to study. Now, I'm not recommending for this. This could be expensive. But I had a guy in my class once who said, Brian, I just can't focus at home. There's all these things going on. I look around the house, see all these projects I got to do. He went and got a hotel, checked into a hotel, locked him in there, says nothing else to do. And he just focused and studied and spent like 2 days there and did nothing but study and practice questions. He came back and passed the test. Now, I'm not saying this is what you need to do. That's spending a bunch of money. But I'm saying is you want to think creatively. Think creatively and see if you can come up with a way that you can find yourself a spot where you can really focus and get this thing done. All right? Practice memorizing and saying the concepts. You want to do them out loud, right? You want to test over and over again. How much is enough? Well, when you are consistently getting 80% on all the exams and the practice tests and things like that, then you know you're ready. Now, on the exam day, be sure to get to the test center early. Now, some of you are testing in Pearson VUE states. Some of you are testing in PSI states. Some of you are testing in Prometric states. Now, the Prometric and the PSI states, I understand, are now allowing remote testing. So you can test over the internet, test at home. That's great. You have to have a webcam, and they're going to be watching you the whole time. But for a lot of you, going to a test center is going to be required, no matter which state you're in, depending on your setup. And once again, it's going to vary a lot depending on which state that you're in. So when you arrive at the test center, just be sure to get there early, right? If you're late, then you miss, and that's a fail, right? It's like taking the test and failing. So be sure to get there early. Here's the thing is, with these test centers, it's very difficult for them to predict how long it's going to take for somebody to take the test. So what my experience has been is that you can arrive as much as an hour early, and they'll just bring you in and let you test. Because look, they want to go home early too. So as soon as you get there, go in, check in, see if they have a seat available. If they got a seat available, typically they'll let you in. So it's to your advantage to show up early. Half an hour, 45 minutes early is no problem. Just don't show up late. Make sure you got your proper identification, which is, once again, vary per state. Typically, they want a picture ID like a driver's license or a passport, and the name must match exactly. Like those of you who have the hyphenated last names, got to be exact. Everything's got to be exact the way you've registered. Everything's got to be the same, okay? Have a positive attitude, which you will because you've done lots of practice questions. You're getting lots of good scores on the practice exam. You'll know that you're ready. And then make sure you eat or drink something before you go in. Because look, you can't take anything in the test center. No water, no food, no nothing. Brian, I like to chew gum while I'm testing. Sorry, nothing, right? Now, you want to have that confidence. You want to go in there with confidence. I had a lady in my class once, that test is mine. I'm going to pass that test. Nobody's going to get my way. Well, look, you want to have that kind of attitude rather than like you're like Barney Fife, going, well, Andy, I don't know if I'm going to pass the test. I hope I do. Well, if you got that kind of, look, I've had people call me and say, I took the test and I didn't pass it, and I knew I wasn't going to pass the test. Look, your brain will make you right. If you tell yourself, I know I'm not going to pass the test, you know what's going to happen? You're not going to pass the test. Somehow you'll figure out a way to not. So tell yourself that you're what? You're going to pass the test. Have that confidence. Go in there like a winner. Now, at the test center, when you go in, they're going to have you take everything out of your pockets. They'll go over with you one. This security there is really, really strict, right? And you put everything in a locker. The only thing you take into the test room with you is the key to the locker that they give you. When you first sit down, there'll be a demo or a tutorial that you can go through on the computer. Now, I really recommend doing that because the clock is not ticking. The clock doesn't start ticking until you see question number 1. So take the time to go through the tutorial. This is a pressure situation. This will give you a chance to kind of relax a little bit and catch your breath, Go through that tutorial. But also, you need to know how their software works. Now, when you go through their software, there's a way for you to be able to mark questions for review. And, I'm going to come back a little bit. You can mark questions for review and set up a timer. And there's a number of other things. Typically, with the software they have for these tests, you can go back in and you can find any question in your section of the test. A lot of states, the question is in 2 sections. There's a general section and then a state section. Not every state's that way, but most of them are now. And so in that section of the test, then you'll be able to go back and review any of the questions, which means if you had a question that could give you an answer to the question you're answering right now, you could go find it if you know how to use their software. So that means you need to take the time to go through that demo so that you know how to do that. Now, you do have to be cautious of the time. All of these tests are timed. And once again, that time will vary from state to state. When you started the class, the first thing your instructor did was went through the exam content outline. Very first thing. Went through the exam content outline for your state. We generally post the exam content outlines for the state in the Google Classroom. And so you'll have access to those, right? Now, when we go through those exam content outlines, one of the things in there is how much time you have. So be aware of your time. Be aware of your time. Now, how do I not run out of time? Please, please, please pay attention to me on this one. This is important, okay? What you want to do is do not spend too much time on any one question. If you get to a question you're not sure about, mark it for review. Do not sit there and stare at a question for 10 minutes trying to figure it out. If you get to a question you're not sure about it, guess at it now. Guess at it. Don't leave it blank, but mark it for review. The questions you mark for review will come up automatically at the end of that section of the test. Does it make sense? Okay. Now, I also, once again, the reason I don't want you to read it blank is you might run out of time. And a question that's blank is wrong. at least if you mark it, you got a little bit of a chance of getting it right. Now, I also mentioned this. Only change your answer in light of new information, right? I've seen this over and over again where people change it from the right answer to the wrong answer because they started overthinking it. So do not spend too much time on any one question. Now, like for example, in Florida, you've got 2 hours for this test, and there's 2 sections of the test. Well, that first section's got 65 questions, and you have, no, yeah, 60. The first section's got 60 questions. Sorry, a little bit. So the first says 60 and 40 in the 2 sections, right? So that first section, you got 60 questions. Well, you can get through those 60 questions easily in like 45 minutes if you go right through it, leaving you about what? About another 45 minutes to go back and agonize over what's the right answer on those handful of questions you mark for review. But you'll do so having seen every question in that part of the test. Now, Brian, what happens? What do you do? You say might be saying, Brian, what do I do if I get to a question where I really don't know the answer? Well, I'm going to get to that in just a second. Now, I do want to tell you that passing this test is all about test tips. And we go over and over this in the class. And I teach this when I teach this, really, really emphasize this. Look, the biggest thing is you got to read the question. The single biggest mistake I see people make when they're taking the test is they don't read the dadgum question. They glance at it, and then they glance at the answers, and they miss it because they don't really read it. And I get this a lot because people go back and go, oh, I knew that. If I'd read the question right, well, read the question right. So read the question twice before you look at the answers. Now, I had this guy who was tutoring. He was taking one of the securities tests, and I charged $60 an hour for tutoring. So here's this guy who was paying me $60 an hour, and all I was doing was sitting next to him, making him hold a piece of paper up against the computer screen so that he didn't look at the answers before he finished reading the question, to get himself into the habit of doing that. Well, let me save you $60 an hour. Just go ahead and do that. If you need to, for a while, hold a piece of paper over the answers on the screen until you get into the habit of reading the question twice before you look at the answers. And then here's the other thing is read all the answers, right? Because you miss a not, a must, an except, you'll be like, oh man, I got that one right. And here's how you tell. Look, I talked to all sorts of people after they passed the test, and I ask a simple question. I go, look, I know you didn't pass, but when you were taking the test, did you feel like you were doing good, or did you feel like you were doing bad? And I almost all the time I get the same answer. I thought I was doing good. I was shocked. I thought I was doing great. Well, look, if you're taking a test and you don't know the material, you know you don't know the material. You're like, I don't know what this stuff's about. I don't understand this. What? Well, if what's happening is you think you're doing great, and then you end up failing the test, that's test-taking skill. You didn't read the question, you missed a key point, and you thought you got it right, only to be shocked to find out you didn't, simply because you didn't read the question carefully. Cannot emphasize that enough. All right, now, basic problem solving, like I said, what do? You get to a question, you just don't know what the answer is. Well, let me give you some pointers, some magic buttons to help you be able to answer those questions that are a little challenging. Now, we talk about this all the time in our course. First off, majority of the questions on most of these tests are all the following are true except, meaning what? Meaning that you got 3 true answers and 1 false answer. Well, when you go through that, this is one of the questions. C here is the right answer. But look how much information is in those other 3 answers. That's information you might be able to use someplace else on the test. That can be really valuable for you. Now, another thing that we see quite often here is that when you read through the answers, right, you got to analyze the thing. Now, if you're one of those people that take a long time to take questions, right, then one of the things I recommend is to do this, once again, for a short period of time. So my A personality types, my people that take the test too quick, what I want you to do is get yourself in the right habits, hold that piece of paper over the answers on the screen. For my people that are slower test takers, I want you to, once again, do this for a period of time in order to get yourself into this habit of doing what the fast people do, which is what? Eliminate answers, okay? So here's what you do. On a separate sheet of paper, what you do is you mark A, B, C, D, and then as you go through each question, mark each answer as true, false, or question mark. Now, once you've designated an answer as true or false, you don't need to look at it anymore. You're done with it. You've eliminated it, right? And don't go back and reread it and try to read something that's not there. You with me? Now, once again, you only need to do this for a short time until you get into that habit of eliminating answers, and you break that habit of going back and rereading the answers and trying to twist the answer into being the right answer in your head. Okay? All right. Then here's another one that we talk about in the class all the time. If you get two questions, well, I'm sorry, you get a question where two of the answers are opposites, then typically it's got to be one of those two. All right, now here's another example. A and B are opposite. A says express authority is this thing over here. B says express authority is this other thing over there. Well, it can't be both, not at the same time. And in this case, you're looking for the one false answer. So if you chose C or D, you'd be saying that both A and B are true, and they're opposite. So how could that be? So most of the time, if you have two answers that are opposite, it's got to be one of those two answers. Another thing we see as a corollary of that law is that sometimes you get two answers that say the same thing. Now, they'll be worded differently, but both answers more or less say the same thing. Well, obviously, those cannot be. So if you have two answers that are opposite, it's probably one of those two. Two answers that say the same thing, it's not one of those two. And that can help speed you up. It's like getting a 50-50 on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. It can really speed you up. Then another test-taking tip here is this one, right? When we take these tests, the people that put these tests together know that people are scared of math. Some of you have math phobia. Let me talk about this for a second. Now look, if you really, it's like, Brian, math is kryptonite to me. Fine. Don't do the math. There's only 3 or 4 math questions on the whole test anyway. You can pass the test without doing the math questions. But if you're going to do that, then you got to make it up by being really good at something else. In other words, if this is your kryptonite, turn something else into your superpower. And what I recommend that something else being is the provisions, because the provisions is a big part of the test. But the truth is, the math is not that hard, and we're going to teach you how to do it. And if you'll put the work in other words, do some practice questions, you won't have a problem with the math. But I also want you to be careful about this. They like to put questions together that look like math questions, but there's no math to do. Now, this is from our life insurance portion of our test, but this one looks like a math question. All the answers are numbers, but there's literally no math to do. And they do that all the time. Like one of the questions that I've heard about on the health test is they'll talk about somebody with an AD&D policy and somebody that has coronary artery disease. They die from the coronary artery disease, and how much do they get from the accidental death in dismemberment policy? And the answer is nothing, right? Because what? They didn't die in an accident. So don't go crazy with the math. I'm telling you, we can teach you how to do it, but the other side of the coin is make sure it really is a math question if you're going to just discard it or go freaking out about it, okay? Don't let them fool you on that one, okay? Now, another thing that I really find is that quite often, on the questions, one answer is really different from the other answers. Now, this question is from our property casualty course, but tell me, which one of these people is quite a bit different than the other one? And the answer, of course, is what? Guests, because guests don't pay. And so in that case, then that different answer is the right answer. You'll see that once again quite often on the test where one answer is really different from the other answers. Be looking for that pattern. Now, getting back to something I talked about earlier about reading the question carefully, that's really important. But we know people get nervous when they take tests. And I've had people talking about this quite a bit because what happens is they get the question, they start reading through the answers, and they get to an answer that they think is the right answer, and then they stop reading the answers. That's obviously a huge mistake. And when people put these tests together, they know that people do that. You'll notice that with multiple choice questions, C or D are almost always the right answer. Why? Because that way they can throw you a distracting answer before you get there. And you don't even get a chance to read the right answer. And it's easy to fix. And here's how you fix it. For now on, what I want you folks to do is to read the answers from the bottom up. Read the answers from the bottom up. Now, scientific studies have shown that if you'll just do that one thing, read the answers from the bottom up, then what happens is that your test scores will improve by 2 or 3%. Now, 2 or 3% doesn't sound like much, but it could be the difference between that heartbreaking 69 and that exciting 71. You with me? And so I'm telling you, these are life skills. Read the question twice, read the answers from the bottom up, and just do it that way for the rest of your life, right? Okay, let me mention one more thing. Some of you got young children or young grandchildren. Well, look, in our school system, who gets most of the attention? The kids that are doing really, really well or the kids that are struggling? And you know the answer. It's the kids that are doing really, really well. They give up on the ones that are struggling. And what's the difference? Well, in second, third, fourth grade, the difference is 2 or 3 points in their test scores. Well, then why is that? Because nobody's teaching these people in these schools, well, at least the public schools, how to properly pass a test, how to take a multiple choice question apart, how to beat a multiple choice question exam. So master these skills and then teach it to your kids or grandkids and give them a chance too, so that they're honor student, and especially because a little bit of difference when they're in second, third grade, huge difference compared to their peers if they master these skills. Learn them, then teach them. Then let's go on to this. I think that's the last one. All right. So how would you like to be able to go to Test Center, have your notes with you, all perfectly legally? Well, here's what you do. It's called a memory dump or a brain dump. Now, what you do is you create a one-page note sheet with all of your key points on one page. And then you divide that page into quadrants, and you memorize the quadrants so that you can what? Reconstruct it, rebuild it when you get to your test center on your scratch paper there at the test center. Sound like a great idea, right? Now, the good news about this is that it will really help you. You have your notes there, your key points, math formulas, whatever you want to do, right? But you have to follow the test center rules. Now, I don't know what they are in your state. I know with the Pearson VUE states, which is most of my states, what'll happen is that if you go in, sit down, and start writing things down, then they'll come out and take the notepad away from you. But what happens is that if you wait until you see question number 1 on the screen, then you're good to go. So you just simply have to wait until you see question number 1 on the screen and then start writing to your little heart's content. Right? Well, those are all the key points. You got the key points there to get yourself ready. Make sure you do the work, do the questions, put in the effort. I promise you the payoff is huge. Put the effort, the time, the energy in, and it'll pay off for you in a great way. Pass the test in the first time if you're prepared, and go on and have a great AEP season. Thanks, guys, and good luck.